The raiders came through the maintenance tunnel, counting on nothing waiting for them. 6 of them, Krell, weapons up, boots quiet on grated steel, 3 days since their last hit, and nobody at Farax station had stopped them yet. They made it 4 steps past the threshold before the ceiling gave up a person. That's how Cathvar would remember it afterward. Not the plan, not the briefing, just Maya Reeves dropping out of the dark with fire already running along both blades, and 6 armed raiders discovering all at once that the numbers weren't on their side tonight. But that ambush sat near the end of a much longer story, one that had started 6 weeks earlier, in a quieter room, with a stack of evaluation reports Cathvar never got to finish. Cathvar of the Zenthai Collective ran tactical theory at the Galactic Combat Academy and had built a career on a fact so basic nobody bothered defending it. 1 warrior, 1 weapon. 10,000 years of doctrine agreed. So when Yorv, the Plecarian assistant with a nervous habit of leading with his eye stalks, announced that the new human transfer had arrived, Cathvar expected another decent, durable primate who'd fill a seat and follow the curriculum like everyone else. Maya Reeves showed up looking like she'd lost an argument with her own hairbrush and won anyway. Loose stance, easy grin, a jumpsuit that fit like she'd already decided the dress code was optional. She asked, almost as a courtesy, whether the curriculum's insistence on a single weapon was really a hard rule. It was, Cathvar told her. Biological law. Divided attention meant a corpse. The lesson didn't wait. Weapon selection, alarms cut the conversation short, and Cathvar walked her straight into a hall of 40 students who'd never seen a human before and clearly weren't sure what to make of the rumors. Master Thorn, 4 arms and 3 decades of scar tissue, laid out the same law to the room, and Maya raised her hand to ask why nobody could carry 2 blades at once. The hall laughed. Thorn didn't. He explained, patiently, that no known species had the neural architecture to track 2 weapons and stay alive doing it. And then, when she asked to try anyway, he offered her a trade nobody expected her to survive. 1 sparring match, first hit wins, and if she landed a single touch, she could keep her second sword. She picked 2 practice blades off the rack like she was choosing fruit, and walked into the ring holding both of them low, wrists loose, looking for all the world like she'd wandered in from somewhere without any weapons at all. Thorn opened with a clean diagonal cut, textbook, the kind of strike built to punish a bad guard. Maya didn't have a guard. She turned her hips into the strike instead of away from it, and the whole shape of the exchange came apart in a way Cathvar's brain needed 3 replays later to actually process. 1 blade caught Thorn's weapon from the outside and nudged it a few degrees off true. The other came up under his arm and tapped once against his chest plate. Match over. Nobody in that hall had made a sound in almost 10 seconds. Thorn looked down at the point of contact, then at his own blade, still finishing the arc of a strike that had already failed. When he finally found his voice, it had lost every bit of its certainty. 30 years teaching this hall, he said, and none of it prepared me for what you just did to my footwork. What followed wasn't graceful diplomacy. It was 5 combat drones, full-spectrum attack patterns, and Cathvar standing at the edge of the ring against every professional instinct, watching a human fight like her hands belonged to 2 separate people who happened to be having a very good day. She lost 1 exchange, took a hit to the shoulder, adjusted, and kept going. 7 minutes later, the last drone hit the mat, and Kurnath, the Vaxian student who'd been loudest in his skepticism 20 minutes earlier, was staring at her like she'd rewritten a law of physics in front of him. Thorn pulled Cathvar into his office that same afternoon and made the argument Cathvar didn't want to hear. This wasn't an anomaly, it was data, and data needed a program. Cathvar had the xenobiology background to run it. Maya, obviously, would need to teach it. The Academy authorized it inside the week. What Cathvar hadn't planned on was Admiral Cross showing up a month later with a case full of live combat steel instead of practice blades, 3 lost colonies on his mind, and a very simple question. Could this scale to the fleet? Cathvar wanted to say no. The injury numbers alone argued for it. A rough first 2 weeks, a third of the class already gone. But the students who'd stayed were doing things nobody's tactical manuals accounted for. Vix had turned enhanced reflexes into a spinning wall of steel. Whisper controlled 4 weapons through telekinesis alone, 2 of them not even physical. Thax, who'd sworn he'd drop everything with 4 hands full, had built himself into an actual barricade. And Kurnath, thick-plated, built for endurance instead of speed, had simply refused to stop getting back up until stubbornness turned into a fighting style all its own. Cross watched a demonstration a week later. 6 defenders against 20 drones running Krell assault patterns, a scenario standard single-blade teams cleared in 8 minutes with casualties to show for it. Cathvar's 6 put every drone down in 3, untouched. Cross ran the replay 3 times before he spoke again, and when he did, it wasn't a question anymore. He wanted a full company trained inside 4 months, ready for the front. Cathvar wasn't willing to hand 200 untested soldiers to a counteroffensive off the strength of a training hall simulation. So instead, Cathvar offered Cross a smaller wager. Let 6 of them prove it in the field first, somewhere the stakes were real but survivable. Cross found them Farax Station, and its unsolved radar problem, 3 hits in a month, local security running in circles. Which brought all 6 of them back to that tunnel, waiting in the dark for raiders who thought they were hitting an empty depot for the 4th time running. Maya went in first, dropping from the ceiling directly into the middle of them. Vix came out of the shadows, a half-second later, faster than the Krell could track. Whisper's weapons struck from angles that shouldn't have existed. Thax sealed the exit with his own arms, 4 blades forming a wall nobody was getting past, while Kurnath advanced through return fire like it was weather. Raylan and Maya moved through the last of them in a rhythm that looked less like combat and more like 2 people finishing each other's sentences. 90 seconds after Maya dropped from that ceiling, 6 raiders sat disarmed and thoroughly confused on the depot floor, and Station Commander Vost stood in the doorway with a face that said he still didn't quite believe what his own sensors had recorded. Cross read the report before the transport had even finished docking back at the academy. He didn't ask if the program worked. He told Cathvar he was authorizing 3 more of them, fleet, station security, colony militia, and handed Maya a temporary commission she accepted mostly, she said, because the standard jumpsuit needed an upgrade. Cathvar signed the paperwork that night with a hand that hadn't quite stopped shaking, half from the raid, half from the size of what the academy had just agreed to build. Weeks after that, the training hall held 3 times the students it used to, and most of them were still terrible at it. That was fine. A few wouldn't be. Cathvar stood at the rail one evening, watching a new class fumble through their first attempts, keeping 2 blades independent, tangling their own arms, dropping swords, starting over. Maya leaned against the same rail, watching a young Drathian recruit finally land 2 clean strikes in a row and pump both fists like he'd won a war on his own. Funny thing, Maya said. Back home this was considered flashy, impractical. Everybody said 1 good weapon beats 2 mediocre ones. Cathvar watched the recruit try again, laugh at himself, and reset his stance without anyone telling him to. Turns out the limitation was never the biology, Cathvar said. It was that nobody had asked the right person to prove it wrong. Down in the ring, the recruit crossed both blades in a clumsy salute toward Maya, grinning like an idiot, already reaching for a 3rd attempt before anyone gave him permission to try again. Behind him, a dozen more students picked their swords back up off the mat, and nobody in that hall was laughing at any of them anymore.